Yes, this meeting is being recorded. I'm supposed to remind you all of that. And we we plan to share this recording with people who weren't able to attend, and we'll send it to everybody as a follow-up. But we have a ton of people attending, so that's great. I've been involved with the Community Cares Grant program since the inception, which I guess was sometime in May, which feels like 5 years ago by now, but we're getting there. Also joining me from DHHS, Diane Lowe, who is one of the faceless icons out there, and she will speak later. And she works in our public health division, working with health disparities. She's a very experienced grant manager. Many of you have communicated with her, whether you knew you were communicating with her or not. She's been taking the lead on all of the response and recovery grant submissions and working through your budgets and all of that, and she will continue to be heavily involved. And the state of Nebraska has also contracted with Deloitte for help in administering and tracking the coronavirus relief fund dollars. And Linus is our partner in that, and he's going to drive the presentation today, and he might speak some too. So that's who has been working on this program. And we have a bunch of updates to share with you, some additional guidance and some tips. So let's get started on payment updates. So many of you want to know when you're getting your money. That's a natural thing to ask. Some of you also applied for our stabilization grant. And I keep meaning to send out a mass email to everybody saying, hey, this is what's going on with it, but instead I've been responding to a bunch of individual requests. So if you've received an individual answer on that, it's probably come from me. We had thought that you would get a reconfirmation email from Amplifund by the end of July. That email is delayed, but we are still on track to process payments this month. Amplifund is a new platform to us. And as you know, that's where the grant applications lived, and that is also where the payment processing is being initiated. Amplifund is new to us, so we're learning. Amplifund is relatively new to state of Nebraska too. So we and the Department of Economic Development are working with them to work out some kinks and figure things out. Transparently, I will say that the payment processing is taking a little bit longer than we originally anticipated, but we're moving as quickly as possible. And when we have more certain dates, we'll provide information updates on our website and probably also out to all of the R&R grantees as a group. Let's move on to an overview of our grant program. So everyone on this call is a recipient of the R&R grant, the Response and Recovery, which is the most typical grant-like program that we have. Many of you applied for the stabilization grant, which was a lump sum award of at least $12,000 to nonprofits and certain licensed providers. We had about 900 applications for that, and we are making 746 awards. For the R&R grant, we had about 300 applications, which is a lot to review. And we have about 200 awards, or I think 193 technically, and that's a lot to administer too. And then we also had what we called the Healthy Places Grant, or shorthand PPE grant. And that is providing a small amount of money to houses of worship and childcare centers to help them buy PPE and cleaning supplies so that they can create safe and healthy environments to welcome children and worshipers. And we had about 900 applications for that, and the vast majority of them will be funded. And they are on target to have payments processed later this month as well. So our next slide shows how money is going to get to you and get out to beneficiaries. So the U.S. Department of Treasury established the Coronavirus Relief Fund, and they keep issuing updated guidance to us, which is sometimes annoying because we set up program rules and then the federal government comes in and says, hey, do this. And that's part of what we're going to be talking about today. But for people who have been through this before, it's not unusual. Oh, hi. So the state government is a prime recipient of, where did our slides go? Okay. There we are. State government, DHHS, we are prime recipients of the coronavirus relief funding. I mentioned the Department of Economic Development also received some of this to grant out to businesses. You are a subrecipient, and then your money is going to go to contractors to buy goods and services for your communities, or directly to families and individuals. And that is typically going to be in the form of emergency financial assistance, and we're going to spend quite a bit of time talking about that. So in our next slide, we're looking at prioritization of funding, and what is on here is guidance. We made pretty clear in our program documents that this money should go to people who need it. And I think that goes without saying, but sometimes you have to say it. We want this money to go to folks who've been financially impacted by COVID-19, communities that have been disproportionately impacted by COVID-19, and people who are of a below average income. When practical, you should prioritize households with a gross income of less than 100% of the median income for the area. And this is a statewide number. Of course, this is going to be different from the east side of the state to the west side of the state, but this is just guidance. If you need to prioritize your funding and you need to consider household income, consider this as a tool. You may want to collect documentation such as pay stubs, unemployment statements, things like that show a person's or a household's income. Your organization may already have a process in place to do this sort of thing. If not, consider this guidance as a tool. Okay, now let's talk about emergency financial assistance. Emergency financial assistance was a budget category in the application, and about half of our awardees are offering some form of emergency financial assistance. What is it? It is monetary assistance to needy and eligible families and individuals. That could be rent assistance to help prevent an eviction. It could be gift cards for food to help a family that's struggling to eat. It could be like a minor car repair to enable an individual to get to work. We list examples of emergency financial assistance here. This is not exhaustive. We can't anticipate all of the needs that your organization may face from the community. But EFA, emergency financial assistance, is meant to be monetary support out to people who need it. It can go directly to households or individuals, or it can be indirect, where your organization is providing funds to a service provider on behalf of an individual or a household. For that indirect EFA, you're going to need some additional documentation. And we'll talk about that in the next slide or two. So in the next slide, we've got 5 key questions that you need to be able to address before giving emergency financial assistance. First, is the individual a U.S. citizen or legal resident? Federal funding needs to go to U.S. citizens and legal residents. Does the individual live in Nebraska? Our funding needs to go to people who are residents of Nebraska. Was the individual financially impacted by COVID-19? There are ways that you can determine that and document that, and you will need to do so in some cases. Is the person of below average income, or is the household of below average income? Again, this is something that we recommend people do, but documenting it may not always be practical. And in certain cases, you need to know, what does the individual owe? If you are making a payment to an account on an individual's behalf, you need to know what that individual owes. So then, do you need to obtain documentation? 2 different categories here. If you are providing subscription or account assistance, you will need to document quite a bit. If the assistance that you're providing is not for a subscription or an account, the documentation requirements are less rigid. So a subscription would be like, I have electricity, I get a bill every month, I'm basically subscribed to that. Or I have a lease, I have a year-long lease. Every month I owe rent, so I'm subscribed to that. An account could be a medical bill. So suppose you had to be hospitalized in May and then you lost your job in June. You probably have some subscriptions piling up. You probably have some account balances piling up. So it's something that is in your name, and if you don't pay it, bad things are going to happen. And that's the type of assistance we're talking about. Non-subscription or non-account assistance would be like the gift cards for food or the minor car repair. Let's look at that smaller print below. These documentation requirements apply to large and medium award subrecipients, meaning those under 50,000. I'll get to that. I'll come right back to that. And monetary assistance of $50 or more. And I keep seeing a question pop up. Yes, we will share all of this. You don't need to take screenshots or be writing all of it down. The majority of our awardees, we are classifying as medium award subrecipients. So medium and large awardees will be required to document this sort of assistance. We have about 75 small awardees, and they are receiving awards of $50,000 or less. And they are not required to do all of this documentation, but because we recognize that detailed documentation may not be realistic and feasible for small organizations and small programs. If you don't know if you are a small, medium, or large awardee, we'll make sure you know. We're going to follow up with some information to make sure you know what category you're in. Monetary assistance of $50 or more is where you need to start documenting a lot. And $50 might be, the size of a utility bill. If you're giving $20 to help somebody do something relatively small, you don't need a bunch of documentation on it. You will need to record it in a log, but you don't have to make copies of all of their documents. The next two slides will explain how to document these requirements. Next slide. Okay. So the part at the top is a repeat of what we looked at just previously. Federal law and program guidelines say that to get our funding, you must be a resident of Nebraska, must be a US citizen or legal resident of the United States, and you must be financially impacted by COVID-19. So these requirements really apply to all sorts of assistance that's being given, but we're not asking for documentation in every instance. The categories below, this really applies to the large and medium awardees. These are things that they will need to document. Again, this ties back to the prior slide. So if you need to document Nebraska residency, here are some documents that could help meet that. If you need to document US citizenship or legal residence, here are some documents to meet that. And then the COVID-19 impact. There are several ways that you could document that impact, but look at that bullet at the bottom, a signed letter of explanation. If you're dealing with an individual or a family that doesn't have much paperwork to show you the COVID-19 impact, a signed letter of explanation is sufficient. Can electronic signature apply? Okay, I just happened to notice that one. We'll answer these questions, probably not in the next 40 minutes. Okay, again, this guidance on documentation applies to large and medium subrecipients for monetary assistance of $50 or more. Okay, next slide. So this is more about assistance for subscriptions or accounts. Again, rental, mortgage or utility, medical bill assistance. If you are providing direct assistance, so assistance to the household or an individual, you need a copy of their current medical bill, utility statement, lease agreement, mortgage statement, something that indicates what is owed. The unpaid or delinquent bills must have occurred after April 1st. Households are eligible for only one primary residence. And no double dipping. I think we made this clear in some of our guidance documents previously. And this is one of those things that should go without saying, but we do need to say it. Individuals cannot obtain assistance from multiple organizations simultaneously for the same expense. If they owe for May, June, and July, and one organization pays for May, one for June, one for July, that's okay. They can't receive rental assistance for the month of May for 3 different organizations. That's what that means. Indirect financial assistance. So this is when you are paying a service provider on behalf of the individual or the household. This is going to require a little more documentation. You need to make sure that what the service provider says matches with what the individual says. So you need to just marry together some documentation. Okay, we're going to move to how or what to expect in terms of reporting. And can Diane be unmuted?
The chance where the cases
Take it over to Brian.
Are legal residents, but parents
appointment.
not. So I'm understanding that
Bring your glasses.
people.
Hey, Diane, can you try unmute yourself on your end? You should be able to do that.
I'm not sure I'm the right Diane to unmute.
Oh, I'm muted again.
Diane, I think we can hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, it's not a Sprint commercial. Oh, reporting expectations. We have not worked out all the details. So anybody who's panicking and looking at this and thinking, oh my gosh, I have to do all this stuff, don't. It's coming. It's not going to be, oh my God, over the top onerous. That is our goal. I do want to point out here on the left-hand side of this slide where Emily was referring to large and medium and small projects. Again, we're going to communicate with everybody after this meeting to make sure everybody's clear on where they fall. But here's a good chart for you, large, medium, small. Your funding mechanisms are listed here. Your reporting, which is the piece I'm going to talk about just briefly. So for most projects, you're going to do a midpoint and a post end of project, basically, report. We are aiming for something along the lines of a survey for most projects. If you have a small project, you will do just the survey. If you will have a large project, you're going to do a little bit more because you get a little more money. For you who are familiar with subrecipient monitoring, that is documents. So if you're a large project, when you do your reporting, you will also submit your source documents, and we will get with you about more information on that and how that will look. I do want to caution the medium and small projects that there may be need to do subrecipient monitoring on your projects as well. We have to meet certain audit standards. So if your project needs, if we need to see those documents, we will let you know directly. But don't panic unless you hear from us, and then don't panic about it. And I can't see the last column there for some reason. There we go. Okay, so emergency financial assistance for those large projects. Going to submit monthly documentation. For the smaller projects, we're going to have a log. We're going to track certain information, and we will get into that in another slide. Emily, anything else you want me to say about reporting right now? Otherwise, I think we can move on.
Okay, this slide is about documentation requirements. There's more stuff on here about emergency financial assistance, but it applies to all forms of reporting. The top row shows a summary of what we've discussed already for subscription and application-based assistance for those large and medium organizations. You're going to need to show quite a bit. Evidence of income is recommended but not required. For non-subscription or application-based emergency financial assistance, or for all emergency financial assistance for small organizations, We want you to keep an assistance log that shows the date of the assistance, the name of the recipient, the amount of financial, or the amount of assistance, and the purpose. Recommended documentation would be number of individuals in a household and address of recipient, or at least a zip code. Those last two are recommended, not required. In some cases, it may not be feasible, it may not be comfortable to collect that sort of documentation for what may be a very small piece of assistance. We do recommend, though, that if your organization regularly collects more information about their recipients, please continue to do so. If you collect demographic information, that would be great, and we would be very interested in seeing it. That's when a zip code would definitely be helpful. Our legislature may want to know greater information about who received the community cares funding, where did it go, what do the individuals and households look like, how many households, how many individuals were benefited by this funding. I know that there's a legislative resolution to study and to study the community cares program, and they will be wanting information from us. So if you are able to collect and you want to share, that would be great. But again, those are recommended pieces of documentation and not required. For goods and services and employee compensation, this should be similar to other subrecipient awards that many of you may have administered previously. This follows federal grant guidelines. We need details on how money is being spent. If you are paying for employees, we need quite a bit of information on that. I am not the expert on this, so I don't want to say any more on it. I don't know if Linus has any bits of wisdom, but Diane would be the expert on this, and I'm sure she will ask you lots of questions and answer your questions in the future as the reporting for this comes up.
Diane, did you want to provide any additional commentary on this?
I think Emily did a pretty good summary there. I guess just a caution that none of this is designed to make anybody crazy, you or us, but it is required. So please be patient with us as we will be patient with you as we try to figure it all out and make it work for everyone.
I'll just add to that, especially recognizing how difficult sometimes it can be to manage federal funds and the reporting requirements. We don't set them, and I know in some instances we may feel a little bit differently about it, but it is the Fed's money, and we are sort of a pass-through agent and trying to make sure that you are able to keep these monies after you get them. We will also be reviewing ways we can help make this easy for you. Again, not making any promises, but if there are things that we see that we feel that others can benefit from, for example, a template that someone has used that could make life easy for everyone and not have everyone reinvent the wheel, we'll try to share those leading practices and those examples. So again, something that you can consider. Of difficult requirements or additional expectations of the feds, one of the pieces of clarification that was recently issued by the Department of Treasury is, from a reporting standpoint, the expectation that each organization that is a beneficiary of federal assistance to register with sam.gov. Some of you may already be familiar with this process and have actually made this registration. But as a way of background context, organizations, businesses that do business with the federal government, either from a granting standpoint or a contracting standpoint, are expected to register with sam.gov. What sam.gov does, it provides a mechanism for the Fed to provide transparency and accountability for the use of public funds. but also allows it to make documentation and enforcement of suspension or debarment. One of the requirements, for example, that we have is to confirm that people who are in receipt or who will be recipients of this program, as with all the other programs across Nebraska, have not been suspended or debarred by the federal government. And SAM.gov is the process or the system platform by which the federal government enacts that. And so it's a free process to complete. The information is provided here. It requires that you go on to Dun & Bradstreet. Again, there's a link to that, and we'll be making this available to you. Request a DUNS number, which is for free through Dun & Bradstreet. And with that, you register your organization using that DUNS number, your legal business name, and a physical address from your Dun & Bradstreet record. Your tax identification payer number will also be input on there, and a routing bank information number. Again, they use this to match against the disbursement of funds reporting that we'll be making. So again, I recognize that this might be another administrative step, but again, it's a federal OIG requirement. And please do note that the expectation is September 1st, which is probably about 3 weeks from today. And so please take the time and effort to do this. As I said, it's a fairly simple process for you to get completed on there. If anyone finds themselves in a situation where they're unable to make that September 1st deadline, please, if you can, communicate that to us so that we are aware and can accommodate that reporting back to the feds.
Okay, this is back to me. This is Diane again. These are really reminders and just a couple of little clarifications for everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
While she's trying to get back on there, we solved through the technical. There is a question about point persons to answer questions about reporting. We will provide contact information and the best ways to reach people with additional questions. We were initially responding to the questions on the chat, but obviously, as you can tell, there's quite a number of them. And so we are tracking each and every single one of the questions. So if you do have questions, please use the chat feature to put that into the system. We will be making responses to those and making that available to everybody in addition to the recording and the PowerPoint presentation.
Okay, on to the last few little pieces here, details and reminders. There are about 23 projects who have not signed and sent back in their certification. You should have an email from just.cares, that certification. If you're not sure if you've done that, please email us, bhhs.cares@nebraska.gov, and we will check on it. But we have to have those before we can release funds. Also, questions have been sent back on condition responses where they were applicable. If we didn't send questions back, we didn't have any. If we did send questions back, please get us responses to those as soon as you can. We need to wrap that piece up as soon as we can too, so we can move on to some other elements that also require attention. I also want to note briefly that a few projects, when they submitted responses to conditions, submitted budgets that were larger than their actual award amount. And I want to caution you that rather than send things back and forth 12 times, you will be allowed to spend up to your award amount and not over. So if your budget's higher than your award amount, bear in mind the limit is the award amount. I've also gotten questions about changes to budgets. Under federal rules, you move up to 10% of your total grant award cumulatively within the approved line items already in your budget without letting us know ahead of time. If you're going to go over that 10%, either in a single instance or cumulatively, like over 2 instances, you need prior approval from us. Or if you want to add or delete a line item, you need prior approval from us. All of that stuff can be handled via email. Again, dhhs.cares@nebraska.gov. I saw that question come in. I've also gotten questions about Amplifund and do we need to go back and update our budgets or check on anything. If you need to go back in Amplifund, we will ask you to do so. We will communicate with you and say, please do this specific thing in Amplifund system. Don't worry about it other than that, please. As Emily said at the beginning, a reminder, most awardees will have the first release of their funds by the end of August. We're still working toward that. That's still our goal. We're still thinking that's more than doable. So, I mean, if you do email us, please, please, please make our lives easier. Please put in your subject line R&R and an abbreviation of your organization name or something with this many awardees trying to figure out who Joe is when they email, send an email. This is Joe from someplace.com. Oh my gosh. Please take pity on us. If you don't put it in the subject line, at least put it in the body of the message. And then one more reminder from the federal rules about your award. We are required to give credit to the funding in written materials. So if you create a flyer, if you have an event and there's a poster about your event, something like that. There is specific wording here that says, hey, we've got, this is partially or fully supported by money from CARES funding. You can literally copy paste this sentence in quotes and put it in your materials and you'll be covered. If you don't do this, I'm not going to come hunt you down and yell at you, but bear in mind this is one of the requirements. And that is all I think I have to say right now.
I did see one of the questions pop up asking if all large awardees will do monthly reporting. No, we will let you know. Most will not be doing monthly reporting. We will be in touch if you are required for monthly reporting. But we've got a bunch more questions that we won't be able to answer right now. That concludes the presentation. Linus, were there any other questions that you saw that needed to be?
Yeah, just going through these, there are just some questions about links to the Treasury guidance. We will also try to make those links available. One of the things I will note for those of you who might be interested in Treasury guidance, notice that you will probably see more on there than maybe perhaps you need because it's intended for the states or the counties as the recipients. So you might not see the guidance drafted in language specifically about you. And then there are also some additional supplementals that come through. But again, what we always try to do is read through those, digest them, pull the relevant pieces, and communicate that to you. How do you know if another agency is paying for some level of assistance? Again, just by asking. We're not expecting you to take on police powers and investigate situations. But again, just ask simple questions and would sort of go on an honor system. We did indicate that you should not be allowing people to duplicate assistance. Specifically, the example we gave is that they got their May bill paid through this Nebraska Cares Fund program and maybe got the same bill paid by another. However, a question did come in is to, could the same invoice amount be split? So for example, someone owes $100 on this month's bill. Yes, this program can pay for $20 of it and another program can pay for $80 of it. It's just the same amount cannot be duplicated in that sense. We'll provide the email address also on there. And someone asked about a logo. We'll provide some information about what you can use from a marketing standpoint and what's permitted. So those are the ones we can answer right now. Please have no worry if there are questions that we have not responded to directly. We are curating these and we'll send out an email with all the questions as well as also all the answers. There are one or two questions here for which we are seeking specifically clarification from the feds. I know there was one question about DACA recipients. That definitely is a hot topic issue and has been from the jump. The other is a situation similar to DACA, where a parent might be a non-citizen or non-legal resident, but the child is a citizen. How do you go about that? So those are those gray areas which unfortunately current immigration system complicates for us, but we'll be getting clarification for that. And then the last thing I'll just address real quickly is we recognize that there are also some indigent populations or homeless populations that you might be serving. Our goal is not to make this onerous. Again, in the responses we'll give, we'll clarify sort of reasonable steps that you can take. We're not expecting that, you know, especially for homeless populations where identification might not be readily available, we're not expecting that if they don't have it, you don't serve them. Again, we'll provide some clarification as to some reasonable step efforts that you can take for that, especially for those organizations that are specifically dedicated to serving homeless and refugee populations. So again, bear with us as we get some of this clarification. Typically, these aren't the expectations that we normally deal with, but the Fed has been very, very onerous in terms of providing the information. And also it has not all been coming in a single flow. It's been a bit piecemeal. So again, we'll try to clarify these, and our hope on our end is that there is no conflicting information that they provide to us subsequent to this. But that concludes today's presentations. Again, we'll send out an email to all the participants. You'll get the PowerPoint, you'll get a recording of this session. You'll get a list of all the questions that have been asked through the chat, as well as responses to them. We'll provide you with links to sam.gov and the federal government, and then also provide you with a link to the Treasury Department website, where if you're interested, you can see additional program requirements and expectations. And it's also on that site that the feds do issue some of their ongoing guidance. We appreciate you all. Thank you so very much. I know you're eager. We appreciate because you're especially on the front lines getting this critical work done. We are working through so many different stakeholders, so many different partners, systems, and processes. We appreciate your patience. Our hope is that as quickly as possible, we can get not only your questions answered, but make sure we get the monies out to you and the guidance so that you can not only maximize the funding, but more importantly, you can keep the funding as we continue to help Nebraskans respond and recover from this pandemic. We only do it together, and we appreciate each of you for helping our people in this really crucial time.
Thank you.
Thank you.